What a year it has been. I know, I know it has been for me. I know it has been for us here at the Acton Institute, and I imagine that it's been for each one of you. How many times have you heard somebody start a letter with reference to this? In these troubled times, with all due precaution and all of that kind of thing. So we've been through a lot, and when you're running a nonprofit institution, that certainly has been the case with us. At the beginning of the pandemic, I think back in February, March, we began to release a series of videos on the various aspects of the COVID-19 crisis pandemic. And they have made their way onto YouTube and our playlists on YouTube. So I want to refer you to them to just kind of get an idea of how we've been thinking about these issues if you haven't yet seen them. Thinking about them in terms of the effect on public policy, on economics, and all of those things associated with the general mission of the Acton Institute. But we still had a lot of work to do. You know, each year we have Acton University, usually right here in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and that's in June. Well, by the time March rolled around, we knew that was not going to be possible. And remember, we have people coming from a host of different countries. And we decided to, and here's another word that's been introduced to our vocabulary, pivot. We decided to create an online version of the Acton Institute, but we really didn't want it to be just a series of lectures. So our staff got together in a number of weeks, put together what I think ended up being quite a vibrant program. And I have to say that instead of having 1,000 participants, we had 4,181 registrants from 88 different countries and territories and all 50 states of the United States. And 90% of them tell us that they gain new perspectives on one or another issue at Acton Institute Online, that the Acton Institute University Online has better equipped them to evaluate what they have to confront in their various work, whether it's academia or in the church or in educational institutions or just in their own communities. So we want to continue to be a resource, and it may be that one of the silver linings of all of this is that we have learned a new way of communicating to broaden our audiences. We can't wait to get back together with people personally, of course, because we're all about anthropology. That's everything that we do at the Institute. But I think we've learned a new way of communicating and kind of amplifying our message. So those of you who cannot or have never been to one of our programs in person, I hope you'll get to one, but in any case, we'll have a lot of material and conferences and information available through this virtual way of communicating. I also want to give you, as I give this year-end report here, to let you know that we did a conference, a summit on poverty. We ended up having 2,700 registrants from a total of 71 countries for that. And then, of course, we had our Acton annual dinner celebration. Really, it's our 30th anniversary. And if you haven't seen that, I hope you go online and look at it. At that event, in addition to just reminiscing about the whole history of the Acton Institute over the last 30 years, we presented the Faith and Freedom Award to a man I think is a real hero. His name is Jimmy Lai. You may have read about him in the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal or other major media outlets. He has been now arrested in Hong Kong. Really, I think he is the Solzhenitsyn or the Mandela of China. And I think he is an important voice both for freedom and for faith. So be sure and look that up with our interview with Jimmy Lai, and we will be keeping you posted about other things related to the saga. In this year-end message, I also want to give you a brief report on our research activities as well as our publications. We've had a rich output this year, maybe because we were all at home and had to produce something, but we really have produced quite a bit in terms of our scholarship and our friends who collaborate with us. Of course, all our work is centered around economics and theology, some kind of integration between those disciplines, and as well as other topics. And we have proudly published over 40 books and monographs in the past year. So that's quite an output. And we'll have a few more expected by the end of the year. I just received a notice from Regular Publishing, who published my book, Defending the Free Market, that they are going to put out next year a paperback edition of that book, so it makes it more accessible to more people. And I'm doing a new introduction to it as well. And don't tell anybody, but I've just finished a book on the parables and the economics of the parables. And we haven't sent that out yet, but we'll keep you posted on that. Acton's original research can be found in both religious and secular venues and classrooms around the world, from the Harvard Law School to the University of Michigan, from Oxford to Princeton, from the Catholic University of America, my alma mater, to the London School of Economics and beyond. So we're trying to really make an outreach to as many audiences as possible. Acton scholars can also be seen in worldwide media, including 85 interviews on radio, television, and online over the past year alone. For example, the director of research of the Acton Institute, Dr. Samuel Gregg, was interviewed on Vatican Radio, of all places. And Acton scholars also participated in 130 lectures and conferences around the world in 2019 and the beginning of 2020. In addition, as I said, we've done a lot of virtual conferences. I have participated in at least 4 conferences in different language groups around the world. So we have not sat back, and quarantine has not stopped the advance of the mission of the Acton Institute. You know, we have a number of top donors who are part of what we call our President's Club. These are people who are close supporters of ours, and we meet with them on a regular basis. And I invited them to send in any questions they might have, and I have 3 questions from 3 of our friends that I'd like to respond to. This comes from Naples, Florida, from our friend Fred there. He asks if I think the virus could be the work of Satan, given the separation is one of his tools, and separation has been universal this year. Well, let me respond to it. You know, in a deeply theological sense, Fred, all disease is the result of Satan's betrayal of God's invitation to the human race to be in union with him, right? Death enters into the world from a theological point of view as the result of sin. So all contagion, all disease would be. Now, do I think that Satan and his minions sat in a laboratory concocting this virus? No, I would think that it's more derivative than that. Where we really see the satanic influences has been in the response to the virus. I mean, people have gotten sick in all generations all over the world. And thanks to the brilliance of researchers and medical doctors and scientists, we come up with responses, as well, by the way, as our natural immune system kicking in. So in a sense, I do think this is satanic, and it does divide. This is what is unique, at least for us in this century, to be divided from other people. We really feel the strain of that and the isolation of that. So I hope that answers to some extent the question you're asking. Another question from Andrew V. in Novato, California, who asks a very interesting question about American culture. and the way in which it seems to be acquiescing to the regulation of organized religion into the private sphere, private matter, non-essential service, to put it in the current jargon. I'm asked, do you see this trend in our public discourse, and what should be the response from our religious leaders? Well, yes, absolutely so. There is a secularist mentality that sees religion as really quite irrelevant. Let us forget for a moment that we built Western civilization and the scientific method and all of that has gone into the economic prosperity of the nations, that religion played an indispensable part both in our theology and in our institutions. Let's forget that for a moment, but confront the contemporary reality. And I think this has two dimensions. One is the secularist prejudice against any belief in the transcendent, because many of these secularist people equate a belief in God, especially the God of the Bible, to a belief in flying saucers or fairy tales. A lot could be said in response to that, but let me say that when you have a way of thinking that has produced the greatest institutions in human history, I think you have to take its claims seriously, even if you don't agree with them. And I think this privatization of religion comes both from the hegemony of the state and the bureaucracy that crowds out any kind of alternate institutions, alternate influences in society. And when you begin to see things through a bureaucratic mentality, you see entrepreneurial endeavors as well as religiously inspired endeavors as a threat to that. The regulatory state then, by delicensing or making our work more difficult in various ways, is trying to marginalize this influence precisely because we provide an alternative to Caesar. What do we need to do? First and foremost, we have to have confidence in our message. We have to see the incarnation of Christ, which we celebrate in the season that is ahead of us, as the seriousness with which God takes the material world, that he enters it through the agency of a woman at a particular time in a particular place, that he seeks to redeem it and all of its institutions, that the material world is sacred and all of its culture and its institutions is claimed by God himself, who is the origin of human life. So I think we have to have confidence, and we need to build those institutions for the next generation. This next question comes from Sherry and Tom, who are in Boise, Idaho, and they ask, why hasn't Acton expanded its in-person activities? Here in Idaho, we would welcome to house and sponsor live events to talk about liberty. Well, I am very happy to accept your invitation. The problem has been, of course, traveling to some places. We can't rent the venues right now. There are various kinds of restrictions that are in place that inhibit gatherings of a certain number of people. So I think that's the simple answer to the question. We are looking for opportunities to present our message in any form that's possible and, of course, that's safe. So I take you up on your invitation and look forward to seeing you in Boise. At this time of the year, we hear all of these beautiful Christmas carols that begin to play in our department stores, on the street, certainly on television or radio and other means of communication. And the best of those hymns, the best of those carols remind us of what the meaning of this season is. That at a particular point in time, God entered the human condition, making himself vulnerable to all of the contingencies of our world. Think about what that means. that this baby comes to us in a manger, in a circumstance that is far from ideal, that is confronted with limitations, the limitation of a room to enable a woman to have her child. What does that tell us about what we have just as a world experienced? It tells us that there's hope. You know, despair is not simply a lack of belief. It's more fundamentally a lack of hope. In fact, that's what the word despair means. What Christ does in coming to us in this vulnerable form is tell us both about the sanctity of our material world, that it was important enough for God Himself to enter it, and the hope that can exist through the means of it. This is simply because the world, even the material world, is not disassociated from the transcendent reality of who God is and what He destines people to be. So as you hug your loved ones close this holy season, even if it's in smaller groupings, know that the light that comes from that beatific face in Bethlehem shines also in your home, in our world, in our time, and for our future. I want to let you know on behalf of myself and the entire staff of the Acton Institute how deeply grateful we are for your loyal support, especially in difficult times, and to let you know that I am praying for you and for your families, for your safety and for your prosperity in the year ahead. May God bless you, and Merry Christmas.